Get all the way through this chapter. It's one of the shorter ones, so that's our goal. This begins as part in Jesus' life, a section in Jesus' life, when we see him often trying to get away from the crowd, have some time alone, or at least alone with just a small group, his disciples and the apostles, just get away from the mass. And that was really hard for Jesus to do. But it was important, and it's unusual how the providence of God works. None of us can figure that out, but Drew's Devo thought rings true with our lesson tonight, because we'll bring out the point that Jesus was a man. He was divine as well, but Jesus was human, and he got tired and he got hungry, and he experienced everything we do, and we'll see that all through this lesson. And there's several reasons that I ran across that people think Jesus wanted to get away, needed to get away, and I picked 4, I think. Let's see, yeah, I picked 4. I'm like Tim, I should read my notes. The growing hostility of the Pharisees, it was getting worse and worse and worse, and that tension was building, and that hatred was getting to be all they could control. And one thing that was controlling them was fear of what the crowds would do to them if they did take action against Jesus. And then I mentioned a minute ago, Jesus was like us. He needed some rest. He physically got tired, just like we do. And even more so, emotionally tired. And he had to feel a tremendous pressure, because he knew he only had a short period of time to get what he came to do done. And then the third reason ties into that. He needed to prepare himself, and he needed to get those 12 men ready for what he knew was fixing to happen. And the apostles were confused like everybody else about how this was going to play out. And Jesus is going to spend some time really narrowing his focus down and trying to get these guys ready for taking over the ministry once he is no longer here. And then the fourth reason that I found was he was just trying to get them away from the crowds who were so bent on setting Jesus up as an earthly king. Over and over we see this, that they wanted him to be an earthly king like King David. When they hear the word king, that's what they're thinking of. And when they hear the word kingdom, that's what these people are relating to, is King David and Solomon and all the kings in the past, and they're hoping Jesus is going to be that kind of king. But Jesus had no intention of doing that. And we know the apostles were just as confused as everybody else when we see them arguing about who's going to be the greatest, who's going to be the right-hand man, who's going to be the left-hand man. So they were just as confused, and he's trying to get them away from the crowd so he can spend some time with them. And by this time, Jesus has been doing his ministry, doing his thing long enough that we see a polarization in the crowd. Some of the people are just eager followers. They want to hear everything he says. And then the other crowd, the other part of the crowd, just wants him to go away, especially the Pharisees and the scribes and the other religious leaders. They just wanted him silenced. So we see 2 distinct groups. And one group was receiving Jesus, and one group was rejecting Jesus. And back in chapter 12, verse 30, Jesus makes that comment that he says, "Whoever is not with me is against me." Now that's not hard to understand. Whoever is not with me is against me. There's no middle ground. Now, granted, at this time, there were a lot of people that were still trying to make up their mind about Jesus. Do I follow him, or do I stick with these Pharisees and the priests that I've been following? But Jesus is calling them to make a decision, just like he calls us to make that decision. And then last week we talked about some parables that Jesus used. And even those parables show us the division that was going on when he's talking about the weeds and the wheat. And he's talking about the different kind of seeds and how people receive the word. And then he mentions at the end the fish. They pull that net in and they throw the bad fish out and they keep the good fish. Two distinct groups. So in chapter 14, I have 4 different viewpoints that we get of Jesus. 4 different ways that we get a snapshot of Jesus. And I separated them by the verses, and I hope this is right. Herod believed Jesus was John the Baptist raised from the dead. Now, we start the chapter with kind of a backup, history lesson, catch up as to what's going on with John the Baptist. But the bottom line is Herod had him in prison, but he's hearing about, and had him killed, and he's hearing about Jesus, and he thinks that's John the Baptist raised from the dead. And that's covered in the first 12 verses. And then we have the second section, 13 through 21, and we see then that the crowd is really pushing Jesus to be their earthly king because of what he's doing. And that's the kind of king they were hoping for. Somebody that could do the things that Jesus is doing. Wow. And then 22 to 33, the disciples finally acknowledged Jesus as the Son of God. And then we close that chapter out with another crowd of people wanting to be healed, wanting something from Jesus, and it shows us another picture of Jesus' compassion. So 4 different viewpoints. And we'll start with the first section there concerning Herod. And he's hearing the news of Jesus and his popularity. Now, they didn't have Facebook, but I'm sure the word of mouth was pretty strong. And Herod he's aware of everything that's going on. He's got advisors and spies and all that stuff, but he knows what's going on. Now, I don't know if he was feeling jealous or if he was feeling threatened because there's another, quote, king. But he's got John the Baptist in jail. And eventually has him beheaded. And we all know that story. We're not going to spend time on that story. So, Herod won't accept that Jesus is the Messiah. But he's okay that Jesus is John the Baptist raised from the dead. So my question is, which one's the hardest to believe? Is it harder to believe that Jesus could actually be the Messiah? Or is it easier to believe it's John the Baptist has been raised from the dead and he's this guy? Just think about that. Which one of those is harder for you to believe? Verse 12 says that John the Baptist's disciples took his body from Herod and then took care of that, and they immediately went and told Jesus what had happened. We know from chapter 11 that those same followers of John the Baptist were sent to Jesus when Herod was in prison with a question from John the Baptist, are you really the Messiah? And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Well, these same followers of John now are going to Jesus and saying, he's dead. He's dead. And then last week in chapter 13, Jesus goes to his own hometown and they reject him. He can't even do in his own hometown what he came there to do because of the lack of faith and their unwillingness to accept him. So he leaves. And we said earlier, Jesus experiencing everything we do, physically and emotionally. So what kind of mood do you think Jesus is in right now? I mean, John the Baptist has just been killed, and he's just gotten the news. And he's still probably a little upset from what happened in Nazareth. I don't know why I have Nazareth. I have a hard time with that word, boy, I'm going to tell you. He had to be depressed, or maybe that's discouraged would be a better word. Discouraged. He had to have been feeling emotions. Put yourself in his shoes. His own family doesn't believe him. They think he's out of his mind. And he's probably mad at Herod and Herod's wife for killing John the Baptist for nothing. A senseless death. For nothing. And Drew said earlier Jesus was tempted. Boy, if I'm Jesus right then, I'd have took some revenge on Herod. And especially on this spiteful wife. I mean, put yourself in Jesus' shoes. If you had that power, that'd be a temptation. I'm going to get you for that. Because Jesus feels every emotion we do. He's 100% human. And if he's not, like Hebrews says, if he's not, then we're lost. If he's not like us, then he can't take our place. We're lost. The next section, 13 through 21, is the feeding of the 5,000 people, plus the women and children. And this whole thing started, ironically, with Jesus just trying to get away. He just wants to go away and get some rest. Be alone, quote unquote. But this crowd sees him and they just mob him, wanting to be healed. And Jesus had compassion on them. And we get a look at his heart right now. Because remember, he's got to be discouraged a little bit from all the things that's just happened. And now he can't even get off to himself and clear his thoughts, so to speak. This mob of people was wanting to be healed. And he loves them. And his love is untiring. And it's unconditional. Now me, if I'm Jesus in that, I'm like, y'all get out of here for just a little while. Let me have some alone time. Come back tomorrow. No, Jesus healed them right then. Took care of it. And in Mark's account of this, the parallel account in Mark, it said, while he's healing, he's teaching. I doubt very seriously that Jesus did anything without teaching. If he's healing, he's teaching. So not only did he not get some rest like he was trying to get, he got mobbed by this crowd, and instead of being mad or aggravated, Jesus might have been impressed with these people. Because he's in this boat going across the sea, and they see him, and they follow around the bank and keeping their eyes on him, watching where he's going to put that boat into shore. And when he lands, they're there. Again, in Mark's account, it says some of them ran to get there. They're there. And Jesus looks at those people. And again, in Mark's account, I know we're supposed to be in Matthew, Nathan, but in Mark's account, it said Jesus looked at those people and said they're like sheep without a shepherd. Now, to me, that's helpless. A sheep without a shepherd is a picture of helplessness. And Jesus recognized that. And he's here to help. He's here to help. These people are desperate. They had lives. They had jobs. They had families. And here they are, they're following around this Sea of Galilee watching Jesus to see where he's going to land in that boat. Because they want something. And they're willing to do what it takes to get there, to get it. Because of their faith in Jesus, they acted. They had an active faith. They didn't sit back and say, "Whoa, Jesus come over here to this town and heal me." They went to him. They went to him. We know how that played out. Gets late in the day, folks is getting hungry. And they have that discussion about sending these people away. And in verse 15, human nature raises its head. And the apostles tell Jesus, send these people away so they can go get something to eat. Basically run them off. And Jesus says they don't need to leave. You give them something to eat. Boy, I'd like to see their face when he said that. I mean, they're looking around and there's 5,000 plus people, and Jesus said, y'all feed them. And then they do what everybody does. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. I'm not supposed to say everybody, and I'm not supposed to say never and always. They do what a lot of people would do. They come up with an excuse. All we got is these few fish and this little bit of bread. That's all we got. That's it. That's all we got. How are we going to feed them? I think Jesus was probably hoping when he said that, they would go, okay, tell us how. We got a few fish and we got some bread. Show us what to do. Boy, that'd have changed the story, wouldn't it? Show us what to do. But instead, they start making up excuses. We can't do it. We can't do it. We see that all through Scripture. God comes to Moses in that bush and says, you're going to be my leader. Moses is like, whoa, I can't do that. I can't talk good. Please. In Scripture it says, Moses says, please send somebody else. Please. Then the spies go into the land. We all know the song. 2 came back and said, yeah. 10 came back and said, oh, we can't do it. They're too big. They're too powerful. They're giants. And then Gideon. I'm the youngest in my family. And my family is the smallest one. Go pick somebody else. I can't do it. That's typical human behavior. Instead of saying, how can we do it? We say, this is why it's not going to work. This is why this won't work. Instead of trusting that it will. So the stage is kind of set for Jesus to teach these people, especially his disciples, about doubting his power. So he takes those few fish and those few pieces of bread, and he feeds all them people, and then he tells them, when everybody is stuffed, he says, go pick up the leftovers. We're not going to waste. Go pick up the leftovers. And they get 12 baskets, and Scripture says those baskets are full. 12 full baskets are left over. Now, probably a very small number of those people that ate knew where that food came from initially. I mean, those that were right close to the front, the fastest runners that got there first, they might have seen that play out. But the rest of those people had no idea where that food came from until the word started spreading. But I bet that really impressed those people, that Jesus took a handful of food and fed all them people. Jesus had to be a little frustrated with his disciples because they had seen him do some really amazing things before this even happens. They'd seen him raise that little girl from the dead. They'd seen him take demons out of people. And they had seen him calm that storm. Some of them had seen him calm that storm. That whole scene of that feeding that 5,000 people, that had to be a day that those guys stuck in their minds. That had to be a mind-blowing day for them guys. That Jesus took that little handful of food and fed all those people. Now, in John's account of this same thing, in verse 14 and 15, chapter 6 of John 14 and 15, it says those people that just ate, now they're really wanting Jesus to be their king. I mean, he just took nothing and fed us. This guy would make an awesome king. And they're so fired up, they're so emotional right now, that it says they try to make Jesus be their king. They're going to make Jesus be their king. Jesus knows what's going on. Now, Matthew doesn't give us that, but he gives us a little hint of what's going on in verse 22. It says Jesus immediately made his disciples get in the boat and leave, because he didn't want them caught up in that hype. Because the apostles would have been arguing, okay, he's going to be king. I want to be right hand. I want to be left hand. And Jesus is trying to get them away from that whole discussion. So Matthew says in verse 22, get in the boat and leave. In verse 23, he finally gets what he wanted. Somehow or another, he gets those people to leave. And he goes up on that mountain by himself. We don't know how long he's up there, how long he's resting, how long he's praying. But we do know that between 3 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning, he's off that mountain. And those disciples just had an amazing day with that feeding of that 5,000 people. But, buddy, they fixing to have another amazing day in just a few moments. They're in this boat, and there's a pretty good storm. And sometime between 3 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning, that fourth watch, they look out and they think they see a ghost. Now, Drew's dad was here, fourth Sunday, and he talked about this scene a little bit, and I'd never even considered that the fact that Jesus was going up and going down and going up on them waves. But he was. And he was walking on that water. And they think he's a ghost. Jesus recognized their fear. And in Matthew it says, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." In the New King James and the King James it says, "Be of good cheer. Do not be afraid." To me, I think Jesus said, "Hey boys, it's okay. It's me, Jesus." That's what he's trying to tell them. It's me. I'm not a ghost. Now Peter, as usual, he's the first one to speak. Brains off, mouth on. That's with me. He's the first one to say something, and he says, "If it's you, command me to get out of this boat. If it's you, if it's really you, command me to get out of this boat. I want to walk on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." So my question is, was Peter testing Jesus, or was Jesus testing Peter? Think about that. Peter says, "If it's you, tell me to walk on the water." And Jesus says, "Come on." My answer to that question would be Y-E-S. Yes. Peter had the ultimate test because Jesus already knew what Peter was going to do. Peter had the ultimate test. He had enough faith that that was really Jesus, that he got out of that boat. Now, he's a sailor. He's a fisherman. He ain't no dumb about walking on the water. He got out of that boat and stepped into the water, or stepped onto the water in this case, and started walking. And we all know the story. How many steps you think he took before it hit him? I ain't supposed to be able to do this. This doesn't make sense. This can't be happening. And he let that old human emotion, those human thoughts, take his eyes off of Jesus. Just for a moment, he doubted. And he sank. And that's all it took. Just a moment, he sank. I found a quote. I don't know who R.T. France is, but that's his name. "True faith is single-mindedly focused on Jesus." Now, if Peter had kept his eyes on Jesus, instead of thinking, "Wow, that wind's blowing," he'd have walked on. But he let that doubt in, and down he went. Jesus says, once he grabs him, gets him in the boat, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, to me, if I'm Peter, I'm like, hey, I got out of the boat. Give me some credit for that, right? I'm the only one that got out of the boat. So my faith might be little, but it's better than theirs. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now, he had said those words to some of those disciples before in that previous boat incident in the storm when they woke him up because they thought they were going to sink. And Jesus says, "Oh, you of little faith, why are you afraid?" In that case, the word doubt, why do you doubt, means literally to be divided in two. Double-minded, undecided, but the best definition I found is to be divided in two. And Peter trusted Jesus enough to get out of the boat and to step on the water. So he trusted Jesus right up to the point where he didn't. And he started focusing on that wind and that storm. And he let human reasoning defeat his faith. Now, Jesus wasn't showing off by walking on the water. That wasn't his purpose for walking on the water. That was just another way for him to illustrate, I'm powerful. I can do anything I want to do. You don't have to be able to understand it. You don't understand how I fed those people. You don't understand how I calmed that storm. You don't understand how I raised that little girl from the dead. And you don't understand how I walked on that water. I can do it whether you understand it or not. And that's a problem we have with God. We try to put him in this little box thinking he's like us. And he is like us in some ways, but not in that way. He can do anything. And Scripture goes on and says, when they get in the boat, the storm just stops. That's all it says. The storm stopped. The winds died. I can't remember how it's worded, but regardless, the storm stopped. And Jesus didn't say a word. Not one word. He didn't say, be still, don't blow. It just stopped. And then in John, in that parallel account, the next thing that happens, the boat's on the shore. They ain't even rowed. They're on shore. Just like that. So miracle, miracle, miracle. Boom, boom, boom. Them guys is getting a show. And Jesus is not doing it to show off. He's doing it to make a point. I am powerful. And they got the point. Because when Jesus and Peter got in that boat, they said, truly, truly, you are the Son of God. Truly, you are the Son of God. And that's the first time those men had said that. Now, they had heard the demons say it, call him the Son of God. But that's the first time the apostles acknowledged that Jesus was the Son of God. So, what a night and what a morning them guys had. Verse 34 through 36, they get over to the other shore. Jesus starts healing people. And people were, their faith was so strong that they were just touching his clothes and being healed. And we remember the scene before when the woman touches Jesus' clothes. Her thought was, if I can just touch him, I'll be healed. And Jesus turned to her and he says, your faith healed you. My riches didn't have nothing to do with it. Your faith healed you. I'm not wearing magic clothes. Your faith is why you are healed. In the same way here, those people's faith is what healed them. Now, as we end the chapter, let's go back and think about Peter for a minute. Most of us can find something in Peter that we see in ourselves. Boy, I got all kinds of, I could give you a laundry list. But Peter was like so many of us in that sometimes his faith was way up here, bold, chest out. And then sometimes he was so low. So low. His faith was high and low. And ours is the same thing. Events in our life, things that happen to us through our life, will really challenge that faith. And we really have to keep our focus on God, or that faith will be like Peter, will sink. And Jesus knew that when he died, those men were going to be tempted to just give up. It's over. And he's doing everything he can right now to build their faith to a point where they'll at least give him 3 days to prove that he is going to do what he says. But keep in mind that as long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was walking on that water. Walking on that water. And then he sank. The water didn't change. Jesus didn't change. The storm didn't change. The only thing that changed was Peter's focus. And when it did, he sank. He sank. This is after Jesus has been resurrected, and he's with his apostles. And he says, why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your heart? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they were still disbelieving and were marveling, he said, have you got anything to eat? How'd you like to see their face when he said that? You got anything to eat? They gave him a piece of fish, and he ate it while they watched. And then later, when he's talking to Thomas, Jesus says to Thomas, have you believed because you've seen me? And the answer would be yes. And Jesus says, blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed. That's us. He's talking to us. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. That's where we need to put our faith. And that right there. That's all I got. We made it all the way through chapter 14.